Coming up on today's episode of the Health Review.
Kindness is physiologically the exact opposite of stress. While stress increases blood pressure, kindness reduces it. We actually have kind genes. Believe it or not, our genes associated with the natural tendency to be kind are some of the oldest in the human genome, at least 100 million years old, at least. The brain doesn't really distinguish all that much between whether you're actually doing something or whether you're imagining. Because even imagining your immune system doing something, we know from research, actually enhances the immune system's performance doing the exact thing.
Hello, welcome back to the Health Review. Thank you so much for joining once again. I'm so excited for today's conversation. I think you're going to love it. Today, we're diving into one of my favorite topics at the moment, the incredible connection between the mind and the body. My guest is the fabulous Dr. David Hamilton, a scientist, author, speaker, visualization expert, who's authored 11 books, including How Your Mind Can Heal Your Body, The 5 Side Effects of Kindness, and his latest, The Joy of Actually Giving an F. Love that. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the science of kindness, how belief can influence the brain and body, why visualization can be a powerful healing tool, and what it really means to live with kindfulness. Dr. David, thank you so much for coming on the Health Review.
Thank you. It's my absolute pleasure to be here.
Very delighted to have you. I'd love to know a bit more about your story. So I know that you started your career developing drugs for serious illnesses in the pharmaceutical industry, which is obviously very different to what you're doing now. What led you to kind of move away from chemistry and drug development into the power of the mind?
I was fascinated by the placebo effect, and I had this wee mini project of my own where I wanted to better understand the placebo effect, because at the time when I worked in the industry, if someone improved on a placebo, the generally accepted belief of my colleagues in the industry was that was always going to happen. So if someone say that pain went away, for example, when they took a painkiller, even though it was a placebo, the idea was that, that was always going to happen. So it's called the natural course of the condition. Now we know that isn't true at all. What actually happens is when you take a medicine, you have an expectation of what's supposed to happen based on past experience or based on what you know it's supposed to do. And that causes your brain to change, and your brain will do whatever it can do given the resources available to it to meet whatever expectation you have. So if your expectation is this will reduce pain, then your brain will meet that expectation by producing its own painkillers. And when I came across that and realised there was so much research that really it really opened up the entire field of the mind-body connection, I thought, wow, this is incredible. No one seems to know about it. So I was so moved by it and so inspired that after a couple of years of looking into this, digging deeper and deeper, I decided to just leave the industry. And I thought I'd rather go educate and speak and write and teach about, how we can better understand and even use this to improve our overall health and well-being.
You're right that people just don't know about this. I think we all have our own thoughts, perhaps when you're ill, or for people who sadly suffer with chronic health issues, where they might question, is there something in my mind that's causing this? Sometimes you'll have doctors say, you could be stressed, or some of it could be sort of in your head. And that can irritate a lot of people when they actually have physical symptoms. So I think sometimes we think about these things, but it's not obvious. And I love that you've gone so deep into this topic, because I think there's so much education to be done, especially in the health and wellness world. We're all looking after our bodies a lot better now. There's much more awareness, education, things that we need to do to stay fit and healthy. But we don't know much about how to keep our minds mentally fit. You've written 11 books, so you must have been very busy since you left the pharmaceutical industry. The Joy of Actually Giving an F, which I'm listening to right now. Absolutely loving this book, learning so much. How Your Mind Can Heal Your Body. Of all the books you've written, what do they collectively tell us about the mind?
They collectively tell us that every state of mind in some way or another does affect the body in some way, but even more so, what it tells us is there are ways of thinking. There are ways of using our mind and our imagination, even ways of thinking nicely about people that can really have a very, very positive effect on us. And I say that intentionally. there's simple ways, even just thinking kindly of people. And that's been something that I've really worked hard at understanding. Even just thinking kindly of people, believe it or not, that causes a phenomenal amount of physiological changes in the body. It's almost like nature is telling us, you're supposed to think this way. We're supposed to be nice to each other, help each other out. And so collectively, I think what these things are telling us is the mind and body are completely intertwined, but there are ways of thinking that can be beneficial to us.
And what are some of those potential benefits in the body that we could experience from simple acts of kindness?
Oh, phenomenal. I mean, one of the central ideas really is that kindness is physiologically the exact opposite of stress. Now, most people assume the opposite of stress is peace, or maybe it's calm. But peace and calm, they are more representative of the absence of stress. Now, that's not the same as the opposite of stress. The opposite of an experience of stress, what it's like, is an experience of kindness, and what that's like. And when I say an experience of kindness, you could be the person being kind or receiving kindness, or even just hearing about it. Someone's told you that they received an act of kindness and it moves you as well. And what that does is that dials down the intensity, physically, the intensity of a region of the brain that gets dialed up when you're feeling stressed. So stress dials it up. And that's why stress sometimes, it's not always easy. And when you feel stressed, to just think positive. And the reason why, unless you're very well, practiced at being able to manage your state in that way, for most people it's difficult. It's because it's a physical effect in the brain. But amazingly, so is kindness. And kindness dials it down in exactly the opposite direction. My favourite one, though, because I worked in my main field when I worked in the pharmaceutical industry was cardiovascular medicine. I also worked in cancer, but I was predominantly cardiovascular. And one of the most fascinating aspects of the science of kindness is while stress increases blood pressure, kindness reduces it. Again, exactly the opposite direction. In fact, there was a really cool study just a couple of years ago where scientists rounded up a number of people, I think it was about 180, 200, something like that, who had been diagnosed with hypertension, high blood pressure. And they gave all of them a small sum of money, once a week for 3 weeks. Now, they randomized them into two groups. The one group, they said, take this money and go treat yourself. Do whatever you like, just enjoy yourself. To the other half, they said, take this money and use it kindly. So spend it on other people. Do something with this money that benefits another person. And amazingly, when they had their blood pressure taken at the start and after 3 weeks, those who'd spent the money kindly had much lower blood pressure than those who'd spent the money on themselves, both systolic and diastolic, the top number and the bottom number. And what was amazing is the magnitude of the effect was comparable with antihypertensive medication or regular exercise. And the reason for that, it's a physical, an experience of kindness produces effects that the knock-on, it produces little hormones, I call them kindness hormones, that literally widen your blood vessels. And it means the heart doesn't have to push as hard to get the blood through, eases off its pressure. What we get out of that is a reduction in blood pressure.
That's absolutely incredible. I'm literally my mind is blown. And I think it's really reassuring because it kind of, from a scientific perspective, tells you that we've evolved as a kind species, because why would these benefits exist otherwise? Absolutely. I think a lot of us have been living in doom and gloom where you hear the news. I used to work in news and you hear wars and murders and horrible things happening in the world. And you start to think what's going on here and why can people be so horrible? And when you hear actually that the physiological benefits of being kind, it's built within us to do these things. And actually, perhaps in the modern world and the way we live, we've lost some of that, and we're not living in these tribal, village communities where we perhaps evolved to be like that, where we would have closer relationships and perhaps kindness was part of the daily routine, and we're a little bit more disconnected, which is hard. It's really hard, especially, I live in London, we're in London right now. It can be very disconnected here, and you can go for weeks without really having an interaction like that. It's not natural, and it kind of makes you realize, that's perhaps why we're having so many cases of people with depression and things right now. For people living in a environment like that, where perhaps they're not in a village community where they have connection around them, but they would like to tap into this, for other people, but also for themselves, acts of kindness. What are some of the acts that we know could potentially help you.
Yeah, the amazing thing about this, I like what you pointed out there. We're supposed to be like this because we actually have kind genes. Believe it or not, genes associated with the natural tendency to be kind are some of the oldest in the human genome, at least 100 million years old, at least. And what that tells us is they have been crucial. Being kind has been crucial over millions of years throughout evolutionary history. It's been crucial for the survival and the flourishing of the human species. So what happens is nature ensures that kind behaviours are physiologically rewarded. So I actually call all the physiological effects of kindness nature's reward. But here's the thing. Nature never meant us to be needing to do grand gestures.
Yeah.
We don't need to do grand gestures. You don't have to change someone's life. What actually brings about these effects are the little things. The shows of support, those little words of encouragement, those sitting with someone and just listening because they need someone to talk to. It's the checking in on someone. It's, helping one of your neighbours, an elderly neighbour, carry their shopping. It's all the little things that we do frequently that bring about these physical effects. You don't have to be looking for how can I change a person's life. It's this person right in front of me. Can I just pay them a compliment, a genuine compliment, and mean it? And that is an act of kindness.
I love that. And I love that obviously you're a scientist as well. So you're bringing the science behind this. I think there was a line in your book about it can even potentially improve wrinkles.
Absolutely.
I mean, incredible. I guess it's sort of lowering your overall stress levels, and that has all sorts of physical benefits. You mentioned also in the book that there can be a ripple effect as well. So say I was to do an act of kindness for you, that might then make you feel great, and then you might pass that on to someone else. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely, yeah. So if you did something nice for me, the feeling I would get, this is what transmits it, it's called elevation. We used to call it, when you help someone, it used to be called helper's high. It still is called helper's high. But more broadly speaking now, when you help someone and you feel good about it, they call it elevation, and so does the person who receives it. And that better feeling state, whether the person feels just nicer or relieved or satisfied or grateful, they will likely pass it on. But here's the thing, the R number of kindness, we're all familiar with R numbers from the times of COVID, the reproducibility rate. It's how infectious something is. But things can be positively infectious, like kindness, like laughter. And it turns out the R number of kindness is somewhere between 3 and 5 on average. And I say somewhere between because it depends on where you live. It depends on how many interactions you have. But on average, a ballpark average, somewhere between 3 and 5. But here's the thing. Researchers at Harvard found that kindness actually ripples out to what's called 3 degrees of separation. And what that means is, let's use the R number of 5 to make the point. So let's suppose, Emily, you did something kind for me, and I feel elevated, I feel good about that. So what you don't see, because you'll then go on with the rest of your day. You're a kind person, so you don't even give it a thought because you do these things all the time. You're always be nice to people, right? So you go on with the rest of the day. What you don't see is what happens next. Because of how you made me feel, I will probably, over the course of the next day or so, simply for no reason other than how you made me feel, I will be kind or kinder to 5 people. That's what the R number of 5 means. Simply because of how you made me feel. Now, and these 5 people are at 1 degree of separation from you, right? 1 degree of separation from you. If you happen to have a wee drone, not that you would do that, but if you did and you tracked out of scientific curiosity the movements and behaviours of those 5 people, what you would find then is over the course of the next day or so, each of those 5 people will probably be kind or kinder to another 5 people each. And what you now have is 25 people at 2 degrees of separation from you. If you had a wee swarm of drones, not that you would do it, but if you did, out of purely scientific curiosity, and you tracked the behaviour of these 25 people, you would probably find that over the course of the next day or so, each of those 25, on average, would be kind or kinder to 5 people. So what you now have at 3 degrees of separation from you, as a direct consequence of you being kind to me, 125 people have had some kind impact in their lives, simply being on the ripple effect, or at the end of the ripple effect. It's like if you drop a pebble in a pond, casually flick it over, hear it dropping, but you just go on with your day. You get on the tube or you get in a car or a bus. Don't give it another thought. What you don't see is the pebble creating a wee wave that travels out over the rest of the pond. The other side of the pond, there's lily pads going like that. They're floating up and down, but then why are they floating up and down? It's because of the wave. But what set the wave in motion was the pebble dropped in a pond, which is a metaphor for you dropping an act of kindness in someone's day. It's not lily pads rising and falling, it's people's smiles. It's the quality of a person's day. And that's how kindness is contagious.
It's so contagious. I absolutely love that. And you just don't think that these acts could have such a long effect for other people too. But with the actual, I guess, types of acts of kindness, I think a lot of people who are living their busy lives, perhaps they're parents, perhaps they've got busy careers, and they think, how could I be a better citizen? How could I help give back to my community? And they think, oh, perhaps it's volunteering, some charity work, maybe donating money to charity. And they might have a barrier where they think, well, actually, I'm really busy right now, or I don't have the money to donate to charity. So they kind of just dismiss that whole part of themselves. What other things could they do day to day that might sort of help them, but they don't have to give up so much time where they volunteer for a charity, for instance?
Right. So in the interactions we have during the day, it could be just making an effort to be a little more patient with people, a little more polite, a little more complimentary. I think, in fact, research shows this, that we tend to hold back from complimenting people because we hugely overestimate how uncomfortable a compliment might make a person feel. But actually, it's the opposite. People really thrive on them. In fact, we underestimate how much a compliment can touch a person's day and how it can stay with them for hours and hours afterwards. So be more complimentary of people, a little bit more patient of people. And even one of my favourite words is confelicity. And it's just, it kind of boils down into just being happy to hear about other people's successes and good fortune. So in the interactions you have with people during the day, and someone says they got a win for something or something nice happened, be genuinely happy for them. Just be thrilled for them. These things, these different little things, they don't take any time, they don't cost any money, but they strengthen the bonds between us, and they actually produce physiological effects inside your brain, forgiving it, and your heart, and your immune system. And you pointed out the aging process. It does actually slow down the formation, or the accumulation of the stuff inside their skin that can lead to wrinkles.
Wow. They should put that on the skincare ads as well. Like, if you add this plus, you're just nicer to everyone.
Be kind cream with a little, or be kind moisturizer with a little bit explaining the science of kindness and why we should do it.
A new business idea for you.
Pay a compliment. You don't even need this stuff. Just put it on as a secondary thing. What really works is paying someone a genuine compliment.
I love that. And for people who, I guess, want to tap into that a bit more, they might think of mindfulness as a good way of getting there. So, a little bit of meditation perhaps. But I think there was some science in the book that actually mindfulness doesn't always lead to people being kinder. It sort of depends on your natural level of empathy, or the sort of empathy that you have at that time. Yeah. Can you explain more about that?
So some researchers, particularly Buddhist scholars, had for years become concerned that the way mindfulness is so popular in the West, that some of it is lost a wee bit of its traditional Buddhist roots. And the traditional roots of mindfulness were when mindfulness as a seated meditation practice was actually embedded within a set of teachings and guidelines that really, to cut a long story short, to distill it down, is about helping you to be a better human being, kinder, more compassionate, and more, of benefit and useful in society. And to enable mindfulness to be more popular in the West, we lost all of that stuff. And, some meditation teachers still teach that, of course, and they still teach those principles. But in general, most people learn mindfulness just from apps and stuff like that. And it's really just about the seated technique. So researchers wondered, is there any consequences if it's not embedded within the guidelines about being more compassionate and kind? Could there be any consequences? And it turns out what mindfulness actually does, one of the things is it stretches you in the inside psychologically, but in the direction of who you already are. Now, what that means, like yoga will stretch your muscles. So mindfulness stretches us on the inside, but in the direction of who we already are. So someone who's high in empathy and who's naturally kind will actually become higher in empathy and will become even more kind. But the other side is also true. Someone who's, what studies show, is someone who's low in empathy, or even someone who's narcissistic, when they practice mindfulness, that expands and they become more narcissistic, they become less kind, more self-absorbed. So mindfulness doesn't necessarily make everyone kinder. It makes you more, a grander version of who you are already. And so what researchers wondered then, if we were to bring back in some of the original teachings and education about compassion and kindness, might that help? And it does. And some studies now show that if we embed a mindfulness practice within a little bit of guidance about using our new improved focus and concentration to be a better person, to be helpful to people, then everyone becomes kinder, regardless of your empathy level.
Wow.
Amazing,
that's crazy. So really we want to look for these sort of older teachings of mindfulness and meditation and things, because I don't know if it's just because awareness is better now and communication is better, education about anxiety and mental health problems. But it does feel like so many people are just sort of just about getting by, and they're using meditation and mindfulness to suppress their anxiety.
And it's so helpful for that. I mean, I don't want to really knock mindfulness, because I use it myself and have used it myself to manage stress and anxiety, and it is wonderful for that. It's absolutely wonderful because it literally builds neural networks in the frontal region of the brain that makes us, it's like a muscle that makes us better able to manage our state. But if we're talking about the impact as in kindness, then that's a different conversation altogether. Because if we do even a meditation, a mindfulness style, where we introduce a wee bit of compassionate thinking, then that also works the brain there. But there's a bias to the left-hand side a wee bit, which is brain networks associated with happiness and joy and positive mood states. So when you introduce kindness, which is bringing it back to its spiritual roots, the practice, then it's not only beneficial for concentration and stuff, but it's also beneficial in the sense it makes you feel better on the inside, genuinely happier, more joyful. And that, in a sense, the brain networks are more powerful. So it makes positive mood states more accessible. Doesn't mean you'll always be happy, because we know that from common sense tells us that isn't how it works. One of life's specialties is curveballs. But it does tell us that if these neural networks are stronger, richer, it means that happiness and joy and positive mood states become that wee bit more accessible to us against the backdrop of life as it happens.
I guess also an important factor is the body being in good shape. This podcast is a lot about physical health. And I mean, I've had my own experiences. Lots of people have their own experiences that when their body is in good shape, their mind feels more positive. And I guess it's easier to tap into these processes and thoughts. But also the opposite, and this is something else that you've written about. You're doing an event tonight, which I'm going to, about how the mind can heal the body. So the opposite effect. Can you tell us more about this? Like, how can you actually change your biology with your mind?
Yeah, so using visualization practices. So one of my favourite visualization studies was done at Harvard by a neurologist called Alvaro Pascal Leon. He got a bunch of people to sit in front of a piano, one person at a time, and play a small sequence of notes with each of their 5 fingers, just up and down a scale, so plunk, 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 just repetitively for a period of time on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so 5 consecutive days. They had their brain scanned each day, and the area of the brain connected to the finger muscles had begun to enrich, and it grows. And we call this neuroplasticity, so it got physically stronger and bigger and bigger. While they did that, a separate group of volunteers sat in the same kind of room, but instead of a piano was a table, and they put their hands flat on the table, closed their eyes, and they imagined they were playing the piano notes. So it's called kinesthetic imagery, and what that means is you imagine what it would be like, what it would feel like if you were actually moving your fingers and you were pressing them against a piano keyboard. What would that be like? What would it feel like? So it's called kinesthetic imagery. They did that for the same period of time on the same 5 consecutive days. They also had their brain scanned every day. And what was incredible, if you look at the brain scans side by side, and I'll show them in the talk tonight on the screen, you cannot tell the difference between those who played the notes with their fingers and those who played the notes with their mind. If you put the brain scans side by side compared to the comparison control group, you literally cannot tell the difference. If you mixed them up and took the identifying, real imaginary, took the labels away, you wouldn't know who played the notes with their fingers versus who did it in their mind. For all intents and purposes, in many, many ways, the brain doesn't really distinguish all that much between whether you're actually doing something or whether you're imagining.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's so amazing. And I've been to 2 visualization workshops this year. I'm becoming a bit obsessed with it because I think it's so easy to just not believe this stuff. We're all quite skeptical about the mind and its power. And actually, there are all sorts of studies. I'm sure you know so many. There's also some with like pregnancy. Apparently, some women who were doing IVF, they would visualize after the fertilization, I guess, the implantation has to happen a week later. And the IVF women who were visualizing the implantation happening were having more success rates in terms of the actual implantation of the embryo. I think when you hear science, and that's what I like what you're doing. You are a scientist, you worked in the pharmaceutical industry. Like, I want to see the evidence, and you're sharing the evidence. I think that helps people believe it. But for people who don't know about visualization, how do you even start? Because it sounds like a crazy thing to do.
Yeah, I know. I love what you said. It sounds like a crazy thing to do, because what can get through to people a little bit more is if you think, why does it work this way? And the reason it works this way is millions of years ago, our ancient ancestors, if they were out in the wilderness and they heard rustling in the bushes, they might think, is that a tiger? Now, if they were right, that saved their life. If they're wrong, it's no big deal really. But if they're right and it was a tiger, then their life would be saved. So the brain had to evolve in such a way that the body would react exactly the same to whether there was a real tiger or whether you were just thinking there might be a tiger. So the reason why visualization works is because back in those millions of years ago, the brain had to evolve in such a way that we needed to save our lives, we needed to be able to have the strength to run away from real or imagined danger. And that's why we've survived to this day. Wind the clock forward a few 100 million years, and it works in exactly the same way. Only it's not just about real and imagined danger. It's pretty much most things. Even imagining your immune system doing something, we know from research, actually enhances the immune system's performance doing the exact thing.
That's great.
So I've completely forgot your question.
No, the question was like, how, for people who think this might sound a bit crazy, how do you even start with visualization?
Yeah. So that's sometimes how I start, is explaining the reason why we have this is simply because it saved our life. And so it's literally embedded in the human genome. It's actually how your brain works. But you can even say to people, people who are a wee bit skeptical, most people have heard of that idea that if you imagine biting a lemon, you'll salivate. But there's other ways. If you think of something that you feel embarrassed about or stressed about, you actually feel your heart racing. In fact, even people who are really skeptical say, what happens to your body when you entertain in your mind a sexual fantasy? It has a physical effect. So there's no question that what you imagine in your mind brings about physical effects. So it's actually, if you really think about it, it's really obvious. It's just, what I love is that science has actually now picked away at it until we pretty much know how it works, to the extent that we're actually concluding the brain really doesn't make a distinction all that much between real and imaginary. So what you imagine does actually prompt your brain to use its natural resources to try to make that happen, given the natural resources available to it.
Yes, it's really incredible. And I guess it's something that takes practice and patience as well. You're not going to see results on day one. Perhaps you would, who knows? But we know that athletes use it a lot as well. There's an advert of I think one of the British Formula One drivers, he's going around the laps, but he's actually not going around the laps. He's imagining that he's doing it, and he's doing the visualization. He's practicing and practicing. So athletes use it to prepare for big games.
Elite athletes.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be, initially, a lot of the research was done with younger people about athletic age, because we assumed that the main application to this would be in sports. So naturally, researchers recruited people for the studies who were of, athletic age. So people usually in their late teens, 20s, even 30s. And also, but at universities, it's easier to use as a population. You put an advert in the student magazine, and so you get students saying, oh, come and participate. But nowadays, researchers said, well, wait a minute, this is a human thing. It shouldn't matter what age you are. So a recent study came out in 2025 where researchers got volunteers. The youngest was 68 years old. The oldest was 87. So these are people in their 60s, 70s and 80s. They got them to visualize, to imagine doing 2 sets of bicep curls, 2 sets of 10 a day for 8 weeks. After the 8 weeks, they had improved in their maximum strength by 22%. Now, no one lifted any weights. That 22%, now, to put that into perspective, that's not a small number. Imagine you went to the gym and one of the listeners here said, I can bench 100 kilos or I can squat 100 kilos, let's say. And let's say you visualised doing 2 sets of 10 a day for 8 weeks, didn't do anything different from what you're currently doing, then tested yourself 8 weeks later, and now you're benching or squatting 122 kilos. This is people in their 60s, 70s and 80s gaining 22% physical strength by doing no weights, literally just in their imagination.
Wow. So you could literally be like having a lion in the morning, skipping the gym.
But here's the thing, you might as well go to the gym because you would have to do the same number of reps.
That's the thing. Yeah, it takes time. And I guess that's a big thing that people need to find time for it.
And isn't it true? You might have come across this yourself. I think sometimes when people are skeptical of the mind-body connection, it's because we're thinking that I just have to think one thought then. And why haven't I just thought one thought and it's all better? If there's such a thing as a mind-body connection, then I should just think and everything should be better. But it doesn't work that way. It's like if you want to run a 10K, you're going to have to train for it. Walking around the block once isn't going to help you. But if you start training 2 or 3 days a week. So I think that the big learning with the mind-body connection is if we bring the same work ethic to mental practice, then the gains are actually phenomenal.
It's called mental fitness, and
mental
I'm
fitness.
glad that people are starting to talk about it. Do you think it could be good for people who want to also work through mental health issues, therapy and stuff? Because I did a workshop recently and she was saying, focus on an emotion that is current or present for you at the moment, something you're struggling with, something that you'd like to kind of work on. Come up with an image for it. Could be a cartoon. It could be, I think lots of people were picking like fire. They were angry about something, focusing on it for a long time. There was music on. And then she was imagining sort of squashing it down, getting rid of it. Could be punching it. It could be just rippling it away. And then see how you feel afterwards. And I was doing this and I was imagining different things and it was very weird for me. I had a snap moment where I just felt like I was back in an old memory from, 12, 13 years ago. And it wasn't a specific trauma or anything like that. It was just a moment where that day I felt uncomfortable. And the emotion just came up for me. And I had a moment of anxiety, like, what was that? Why did that come up? So strange. And then I felt so calm after. And it's this thing that I guess a lot of psychotherapists also believe is like your mind and your body, you do like store certain traumas or emotions. And if you don't process them properly, they can live inside you. Do you think visualization is a good technique to use maybe alongside therapy if there are things that you're trying to work on?
Absolutely. I love you say alongside therapy because I always say to people, visualization isn't something you necessarily do, on its own. I always would say visualize in addition to whatever therapy you're undergoing or whatever medical advice you're following. Don't visualize instead of it. Let me give you an example. Lots of studies now show that people who've had a stroke, if they combine physiotherapy plus visualization, their recovery is much more and much faster than if they just do physiotherapy alone. But if you just do visualization without the physiotherapy, it's not as much. So what the message is from these types of research is you combine visualization with whatever else, so working alongside the therapy, for example, and you're using your mind as an adjunct, I suppose, as something that can enhance whatever else you're doing. So because there's lots of therapies and practices out there and lots of people who are very, very good at leading you through these therapies and practices. So what visualization is saying is, not saying this is better than all these things. It's what if I this is how I can add my mind and my thinking to support all these other wonderful therapies and practices out there, and that can actually possibly in a lot of cases make it work even better for us.
And for people who are going through a chronic illness, something that they're really struggling with, I know that Maya, who's a big she's a
wonderful book called Visualize. I've read it. I love it.
So the workshops I've been to were with her and very inspiring. And she won't. I mean, she's very public about her journey, and she had ulcerative colitis. part of her therapy, I guess, to healing was imagining. She would visualize like piranhas coming for her like bowels, I guess, and then she would like shoot them out the way. And this was part of when she was in hospital and basically was unable to live a normal life and in agony most days. And she said it was such a helpful tool to be able to walk properly again and actually live a very full life. So it's interesting that it could help with potentially with chronic illness. What are some things that people could think about? So if they haven't tried it before, but they are really struggling with their health, and it's something they're just willing to give a go alongside, their treatment that they're also carrying out.
Yeah, so visualize it. The key is to think of a way of mentally representing the condition. So it can be symbolic, it can be, if you know a bit of biology, it could be exactly what it looks like. I like the fact you mentioned there, piranha fish. People often use piranha as something that's eating. Sometimes they use it positively, like for the immune system, or like Pac-Man or something. Just think of something, a way to symbolize it, whatever the condition is. And then in your imagination, just turn the illness into wellness. Let me give you a couple of examples. So you were mentioning there about well-being a moment ago, and someone, I remember I met a guy a few years ago who had been struggling with depression for years, and he said he felt broken. So he pictured himself, how he felt, his brokenness, as a mirror that he used to love that was in his wall, and he imagined it broke, it fell on the ground. So he imagined sweeping up all the shards. Imagine putting them in a cauldron, melted them until it was liquid mirror, poured it back into the frame, blew on it to cool it down, hung it back in the wall. He did that visualization every day. And having suffered with depression for years, he said within a couple of months, game changer, completely changed his life. Another, Maya's example of shooting the piranha, that's very similar actually to one I mentioned in the first edition of my book, How Your Mind Can Heal Your Body, of a gentleman who had myasthenia gravis, which is an autoimmune condition. Which is, the immune system attacks the body. And in this case, it attacks a little chemical. And he pictured it as piranha, but he shot them with a pop gun. And his, not like a big, machine gun, no violence kind of thing. It was like a gentle pop gun, but enough that it would stop eating that little chemical. And within 11 months, he completely recovered. His consultant actually said, "You are the only person I've ever known, ever heard of, who has completely recovered from myasthenia gravis." Another lady who had lupus. And lupus is the Latin for wolf. She imagined lupus was a ferocious wolf in her body. So she said, "I decided to tame the wolf." So every day she stroked its mane. She kissed its head, she kissed its muzzle, and she hugged it, and she told it how dearly she loved it and how much she loved it so much. And it doesn't need to protect her because she's fine, it's safe. All is well, I'm safe. And she loved it. And her husband are watching the TV, watching EastEnders at night. Her husband's glued to the TV. She said, "I'm half watching the TV, the other half of me stroking its mane, telling it how much I love it." Again, within about 9, 10, 11 months, something like that, her doctor had taken her off all lupus drugs. She was in remission, and that was nearly 20 years ago, and she made a complete recovery from it. So you can use visualization in a way, you can make a mental representation, like something to symbolize it, or you can do something really biologically. But as long as you take a way of representing an illness and turn that into a way of representing wellness, and as long as you get to an end that says wellness, then you're doing it correct. How you get there, what pictures you use, entirely up to yourself.
It's so powerful, and we should all try our best to do it regularly. I guess that's one of the big things. It's small but often. Like how often would you suggest doing it? How long is a good time to try it for?
Great question. Because what's more important than how long you do it for is actually how often you do it. When you come to looking at how the brain changes through visualization, the brain changes through repetition. So repetition. Think about when you go to the gym. You do reps, you do sets of stuff, and the strength increases, the muscle tone increases, not through lifting a weight once, but through the repetition. It works exactly the same way with visualization. It doesn't matter how much weight you're lifting, it's how often you do it. So like, maybe 3 or 4 times a week. Some people do it every day. Some people do it 3, 4, 5 times a week. Sometimes just for 5 minutes. a day. Some people do it longer. Some people say, they're so motivated and inspired, they might do 20 minutes, half an hour. It doesn't really, obviously it does a great lot of good, but it's a repetition that matters more than how long you do it for.
So I guess it's something that you kind of want to find a place in your day where actually you can build a routine around it. I've started a new routine where my phone is not in the bedroom. I've put it in the kitchen away. When I get into bed, while I'm waiting for my husband to get ready or whatever it is, for 10 minutes before bed is when I'm trying the visualization. And I feel like that is a good routine, because it's like, you're going to go to bed every night. And if you always leave your phone out of the room, it's not going to distract you. You've got nothing else to do if you've got to wait. You've got a partner you're waiting for to come to bed, or whatever it is. If you've got a bit of time before you need to go to sleep, some people read books, that's a good time, I think. Are there any times that you do it, at any parts of your routine where you think it works best for you?
Yeah, for me, I love the mornings. I'm really productive in the morning. So when I'm visualizing, it tends to be in the morning time. Only, I say, because I feel I write most of my books in the mornings as well. I'm more alert and stuff like that. But for other people, late at night, I have to say, sometimes I'll visualize literally before I get out of bed in the morning. It depends if I've got like a busy day or something, and I quite enjoy that. But also I do visualization sometimes late at night, but most of the time for me, it's in the morning time, simply because I feel so mentally alert and focused on things.
So I guess the key is just finding a moment in your day. And I guess for people who are even now still skeptical, even though we're raving about it and like you've given so many examples as to how it can help, I guess the least you could benefit from it is that actually it will probably relax you and calm you.
Exactly.
If you manage to visualize something that is positive that you're looking to do, if you do that regularly, even if it's 5 minutes a day or 4 times a week for 10 minutes or whatever you can fit in, hopefully over time it will have similar effects to, I guess, meditation might have on your blood pressure, on your endorphins and things like that.
Yeah, it's just about that. I love what you said about just building it into your day, finding almost like a habit, I suppose, a way of making that your normal kind of thing. And just, I say to people, just experiment, just try it out and see what happens.
I absolutely love that. If you're listening now and you've got a goal or something or an emotion that you're working through or something you'd love to kind of achieve, this is a good way to start, as well as the actual action. It could be studying for an exam. It could be a career goal. It could be a relationship goal. It's something that's been so underestimated for so long.
Absolutely.
Going back slightly more to just general mindfulness, how do you think we can practice self-compassion and kindness to ourselves, which I think a lot of people are very hard on themselves, without it becoming a little bit sort of self-indulgent or focusing too much on yourself? Because actually with anxiety, for a lot of people explain it, it's like actually the amount of time I spend worrying about myself and my life and my troubles, that actually I could be thinking about something else more productive.
Yeah, and it's really tough. I've struggled with anxiety in my life as well. I know exactly what that's like, and you feel that you're wasting a heck of a lot of time. But from a self-kindness perspective, I think there's a scale. And at one end of the scale, we're actually feeling great, and you've got lots of time and energy and resources with which to do your job well, or to be present in meaningful ways for the people that you care about. But at the other end of the scale, you're tired, and maybe you're anxious, you're exhausted, you're burned out, maybe depending upon the context of your life. And at that moment, at that end of the scale, all you can do is attend to yourself, because you've nothing left. Somewhere in between there is a sweet spot, or maybe a sweet area. And what that means is you recognise what you need to do to support your mental health, your mental and your physical well-being, and you act on it. And the key is you act on it, you do whatever is meaningful to you, and you do it on purpose. And if you build that into, again, coming back to what you said a moment ago, if you build that into your routine so that you're always doing little things to manage your state, then the chances are you might not actually find yourself slipping back into there when it becomes something you have to do just to keep above the water. You actually build it into your state. So it's like picking things. Here, I'll give you a few examples off of my own personal life. I play tennis. I live in Dunblane. We moved there, my partner and I moved there about 10 years ago, famous for Andy Murray, more latterly the tennis player. And I play tennis, not just because I enjoy it and it's physically healthy, but because it supports my mental health. And I know that by doing it, it gives me something that I feel that I'm getting better at, and it gives me a sense of achievement. And so knowing that and doing it on purpose makes it an act of self-kindness. I also cook. I love to cook. I'm not master chef, but I love fiddling about with recipes and improving them to my taste. And again, by doing it on purpose, but not just when I feel a need to because I'm tired and I need to do something for myself, but I build it into my routine. This is what I do kind of thing. Then it avoids me falling down into that need to do something now because I'm hurting, I'm anxious, I'm stressed. Another thing I do is a study. I'm well into a mathematics and physics degree, just part-time, just purely out of curiosity.
You do.
Just like the subject. I had to sit a 3-hour quantum mechanics exam. That's 3 hours of my life I won't get back. But again, that is something that's meaningful to me. And by doing something that I love, for me, it supports my mental health. And the point I'm making is if you build these meaningful things into your life, then you're sitting in this sweet spot where it means that you're less likely to be down at that point where you really need to do something because you're struggling. And it's about building it into your routine. And until, I guess, self-care becomes normal. It becomes part of the normal.
And you don't think of it as self-care.
No.
It's just your life.
It's your life. And if you do that, then it doesn't feel selfish because you're realizing if I do this and build this into the context of my life, then I'm better able to be present for the people in my life in meaningful ways. I also can do my job better and have more mental space available. Ironically, by doing these things that take up time, by doing that, I'm freeing up the mental space I will be using for all this other stuff. I'm actually freeing it up, which means I'm more able to be present for the people in my life that I want to be present for.
It makes so much sense. And we spend so much time, I think, focusing on our careers and managing and doing tasks and project managing and all these things. And you think, why would you do that for your career, but not actually for yourself? Absolutely. It's so important. I was going to ask you what are the things you like to incorporate into your life, and you've already answered it. Thank you so much. I love everything you're doing. I think it's incredible. I want everyone to listen to this podcast, share it with your friends. If it's resonated with you, if you feel like it's inspired you, then give visualization a go. Read Dr. David Hamilton's books. I'm going to keep reading your books. I'm going to your talk tonight. For people who want to follow you, want to read your books, where can they find you online?
My website is drdavidhamilton.com, and that leads into all my social media. I've got, I send weekly emails of Better You Backed by Science. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, basically everything, YouTube. I make loads of videos about the mind-body connection, kindness, really just sharing a lot of useful content. And you can access all of that through social media or through my website.
Thank you so much, Dr. David Hamilton. I think it's been one of my favourite conversations ever, by the way. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm going to try and take a lot of this into my own life. Hope everyone else will too. So thank you for coming on the Health Review.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for chatting to it. Thanks for inviting me on, Emily.
Thank you.